Hello, I'm your host, Jessica Bernan. I'm an author, creative consultant, and a horticultural therapy practitioner. And with my company, Basker, I help people and businesses use nature and gardening for mental and social well-being. If this is your first time here, this podcast is called Inside and Outside because we talk about inside things and outside things. I'm equally obsessed with growing flowers and watching shitty TV in bed. So I bring those two things together in this podcast. Inside things include TV, books, movies, pop culture, internet gossip we're obsessed with, and outside things are everything from our favorite flowers to our first nature memories and reasons to grow. This episode is a little bit different though, because we have the ultimate garden outside expert. It's a dream guest. It's Clare Foster. Clare Foster is the garden editor at House and Garden magazine. She's a garden journalist. She was at Gardens Illustrated from 96 to 2005 before heading to House and Garden. And I don't know if you're a subscriber to House and Garden. It is my most favorite online place in the world. It's based in the UK, and every single home that they show, I want to live in. Every single garden that they show, I want to be in. It's just the best website. I will obviously include a link to it in the show notes. And then Claire's also written 6 books, including her most recent, Pastoral Gardens. She's a weekly column on Substack and an amazing course on Create Academy on growing flowers from seed. I'll include so many links in the show notes. And like I said, this episode is a little bit different because usually I'll have my guest explore their relationship to nature and maybe encourage them to grow if they're not only growing. But Claire's the ultimate expert here, so I thought it would be fun to ask her some basics of gardening, her views on some hot topics in the horticulture space, like getting rid of lawns. And if you're not into gardening, stay. She's just so kind and cool. And I just find it so incredibly soothing to hear someone talk about something they're passionate about. So she did bring an inside pick too. She brought a TV show. So let's get to Clare right now. Actually, first, a message from this week's sponsor, Week of the Website. They are a return sponsor, and I couldn't be more happy to have them back. Talk to you on the other side. A website in a week. A beautifully designed website in a week. Yes, it's possible with Week of the Website. They've been doing this for over a decade. Their team is dedicated to building amazing websites in just 1 week. And while they're pretty big time, you're going to feel like their only client. They really have a compassionate, hands-on approach. Week of the Website was a sponsor last season, and I've already heard from a listener they had a great experience using them. Architect Miles Trudell and his partner used Week of the Website to update, modernize, and add a little polish to his site, and it looks so good. That's what I love about Week of the Website. Their services aren't just for brand new websites. They can help you give your site a refresh or add newness to what you already have. When you're running a business, sometimes a little update to your website is the last on your to-do list, but Week of the Website can help. Their past clients have included coaches, floral studios, restaurants, entrepreneurs, nonprofits, and even a beekeeper. Their Week of the Website launch is a great place to start. A custom Squarespace website built in 1 week that includes a dedicated product manager, a designer, 3 design review calls, SEO and mobile optimization, and a lifetime trading portal access, and more. Head to weekofthewebsite.com/inside-outside to book a time and learn more. And for Inside Outside listeners, get 1 free month of their concierge support and hosting when you book a project with them. That's weekofthewebsite.com/inside-outside, and I'll include a link to this in the show notes and a link to Miles' site too. Clare Foster, thank you so much for doing this. I just squealed when you said yes to doing this interview, so thank you.
That's funny. I love that. I'm honored, in fact.
So, we sort of have a formula for this podcast, but we're going to break the formula a little bit for you because, I started this podcast to really get people enthusiastic about maybe connecting more with nature or maybe to start to garden. So I generally interview people that aren't gardeners and are not writers about plants. So we're going to shift it a little bit, but I do want to kick it off was just asking you, so much of my work is rooted in horticultural therapy. So have you had a moment lately where the garden was some type of solace or therapy for you?
Well, I think it always is, actually. I mean, I've been gardening since I was probably in my late 20s. Well, in fact, I grew up with gardening because my parents gardened and still do garden. But I think as I've got older, I'm in my 50s now, and I realize how much I need to garden. And I have a really busy life, and I'm always running around seeing lovely gardens and doing gardeny things and writing. But actually, the time that I spend on my own in my own garden is my solace, and it's my therapy almost. I think I need that time to really connect with the plants and with nature, and just makes me feel good. It makes me feel happy, and it
Yeah.
just, you can't beat it.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was on a podcast and they asked me, can you share how the feelings that you feel and being aware of the feelings that you feel being in the garden. But when I'm doing it and I'm in it, I'm not thinking like, wow, this is really helping with my stress. It's just this intuitive feeling. But do you ever feel like, okay, this feels awful. I need to go out and quite literally touch flowers, touch grass. Like, do you use that as a therapeutic tool?
Um, I don't think I knowingly do. I
Uh-huh.
mean, I just, as you do, you just do it kind of automatically. And I guess if you're really thinking about it, your heart rate slows and you tune into the birds perhaps. And what you're doing is so kind of meditative in a way, and you're really concentrating on it, and you're doing something purposeful. So without realizing, it makes you feel better. It takes that stress away. I use it quite often when I'm writing, and when I'm trying to get to a deadline and I'm stressed, and I get writer's block like any writer at some point. And quite often then I will just leave my desk. I will go outside, even if it's for half an hour, and come back and just feel revitalized and have lots of new ideas in my head. So it just works so well, I think, and hand in hand with writing.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you, I'm so curious about your career. And were you a writer first and then a gardener that started to write about gardening? Or were you a gardener first that then learned to write?
I was a writer first, so I started my career in book publishing. So I did an English degree, and then I got a job in for an art book publishers, and learnt quite a lot. It was a very small company, and then I worked for Thames and Hudson for a few years, and then I decided I wanted to work on a magazine. I wasn't gardening. I had no horticultural kind of thoughts or or direction, but I was at Thames and Hudson. I was working in the publicity department, and I was working on a book called Derek Jarman's Garden, which is about quite a famous man and quite a famous garden in England. And I was sending proofs of this book out to Gardens Illustrated magazine, and I remember looking at that magazine and going, "Oh my God, gardens are beautiful. Gardens are art," and I hadn't really made that connection before. I'd always associated gardening with maybe older people and,
Hmm.
pretty boring, dull stuff. But I saw these gardens as works of art because the photography in Gardens Illustrated is so good. And I saw a job at Gardens Illustrated in The Guardian for a sub editor, and I went for that job and I got it, and the rest is history. And that was when I was in my late 20s.
And so that's so fascinating because I think in the horticulture world, in the garden world, I definitely think that there sometimes can be, oh, well, if you don't have a horticulture degree or you're self-trained, it's interesting that they were like, yeah, come on, you're a writer, so you can write about gardens without any sort of garden experience.
Yes, yeah. And I think, I mean, I, hands up, I have never done a horticultural course ever. But because I've learnt by reading other people, because I've learnt by doing it myself, I think, well, I know I have quite a lot of knowledge now. And even though I sometimes still feel like a fraud. I mean, that's just, everyone has that, don't they? Bit of imposter syndrome. But, I have met quite a few people, garden designers, nursery people, or horticulturists who have not had that formal training, but because they're so passionate about what they do, they're just brilliant. They're brilliant at it, and that formal training isn't necessarily absolutely imperative.
It's kind of what I wanted you to say. That's great. I think there's so many people that they really get intimidated by starting something in horticulture because they don't have that degree. And I mean, I think it's similar to being a chef or something like that, where, in some circles, that formal training means you're more accepted. But I don't know. I think we need to be more forgiving of that, especially because it's harder to pay for school now and it's harder to do things. But I think trade schools can also be an amazing place to learn about horticulture as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, apprenticeships over here, I don't know whether you have that, but when people go, youngsters go and work with people and learn directly from them instead of doing a degree, I think is a fantastic way to learn. It really is. And it means that you are on the ground doing things and learning firsthand from people who know what they're doing.
Yeah. Okay, so we're now entering a new segment that I made up this morning called "What Does Clare Foster Think About This?"
Okay, sounds good.
You ready?
Yep, I'm ready.
So usually the second portion of our show is I bring a study or research or something about gardening, just sort of amaze the person I'm interviewing. I don't think I could find one that you didn't know about. So we're switching this segment. What does Clare Foster think about? You have been, I saw that you recently wrote about lawns, artificial lawns, and I am a huge RHS podcast listener, and they quite frequently talk about replacing lawns with gardens. So I wanted to, I saw that you had just recently went to a press event about lawns and artificial lawns. Could you talk a little bit about this movement that's happening in the UK and why these lawns can be problematic and what we can do about it?
Yeah, there's been quite a movement in the UK recently about doing away with some of your lawn, perhaps. And there's been a big movement called No Mow May, where you let your lawn grow long for a bit and you see what comes up, and all sorts of weeds and buttercups and daisies come up, and they're good for the pollinating insects. So I think it's part of a wider movement that we're really seeing here at the moment, where people are really thinking about nature and trying to do something about the depleted nature in this country, because we have, awful, terrible statistics with the lack of pollinating insects and lack of birds, and nature in general is in huge decline over here. And there are lots of people who are trying quite experimental ways of gardening. So to bring more diversity into their planting and gardening for nature, as well as for themselves. And yet there are still a lot of people in this country who pave over their front gardens and don't have any flower beds, and they might have a patch of artificial lawn instead of real lawn, because of course lawn is better than artificial lawn. Mm-hmm. Where nothing grows and water just can't permeate and everything is just awful. So yeah, I think people are being quite forward thinking in this country, and really trying to think about what they're growing and why, and just generally gardening for nature, and not against it.
Yeah. And, something that I've read a lot about too is just that community building, where putting a garden in your front lawn as opposed to in the back or on the side, it really just invites people to connect. And it also, there's been studies to show that having views of gardens in a neighborhood or a city can reduce crime rates. It can reduce aggression. And I think that it's such, and I don't know if it sounds like the UK is also experiencing, it's just such an American thing to have this green lawn that you have to constantly be treating to make it green. And I would love to just dig it all up and just put some flowers and grow things there. But I wonder why historically we're just so obsessed with lawns.
I know. I don't know. I honestly don't know where it came from. It would be interesting to look at the history of it, wouldn't it? And it's interesting that it's, you have it in the US and we have it in the UK. People are obsessed with their lawns. In fact, my husband's quite obsessed with our lawn, and I'm always trying to dig it up and put more plants in. But in fact, I have a front garden and we live in the middle of a village. And when we arrived here, it was just like this big expanse of gravel. And I've got it's an old cottage in the middle of a village. It needs a cottage garden in it. So I just immediately, when we moved in, dug up some of that gravel and put some brick edged beds in and just stuffed as many plants as I could into those beds. And people walk past. Oh, and the other thing was that there was a huge laurel hedge that was just kind of barricading out the lane and just make it all dark and horrible. So we got rid of that. That was literally day 2 after we moved in. And we put a picket fence in, which looks right for the cottage garden. And people walk past and they see my hollyhocks and my flowers and all the colour, and they're commenting all the time. And so it's just, and that feels good. And I love it when people do that. And I know that people really appreciate it, and hopefully it makes them feel good and want to do the same in their gardens as well.
Yeah, I'm cottage garden obsessed. And, I think when I mention cottage gardens often to people here, they don't know what a cottage garden is, or they've never heard of a cottage garden. I definitely, obviously, it's a term that came from the UK. So could you share a little bit about what a cottage garden is, and maybe a recipe of what makes the best cottage garden?
Well, yeah, I guess it is. It's a very English thing.
Mm-hmm.
But you can also find it in gardens throughout Europe, in Eastern Europe, in Romania and Transylvania, there are lots of cottage gardens. So I think traditionally in Europe, these cottage gardens were full of flowers and vegetables and herbs and a real kind of hodgepodge of different things. And so it's definitely informality rather than formality that defines a cottage garden. And there are certain flowers that are kind of, that are musts in a cottage garden, if you can grow them. And those are hollyhocks and roses, irises, anything that's kind of not too posh, I would say, something quite kind of relaxed. And it doesn't matter, the colour doesn't matter, as it has to be as colourful as possible. The mix should be as joyful as possible, really. And scent is important too. So things, I always try and put lovely tobacco plants in, and things like, Daphne in winter. So you've got that scent. And so it's about all the senses. And for me, it's also about seasonality. So I try and have colour in my garden all year round. So I'm starting with things like tulips and honesty, and then going through all the peonies, and then through summer. And you've got the, what would you have in summer? I mean, there's so much. The hollyhocks and the love in a mist. That's a real cottage garden favourite. Mm-hmm. And then dahlias, of course. And dahlias were so popular and still are for cottage gardeners. And then taking it through to autumn, so you've got the asters, and I've just got into chrysanthemums, which are very old-fashioned. But I went to see a chrysanthemum nursery earlier this week, and so that, those are flowering for us now at the end of October and well into November. So you have literally 3/4 of the year you have colour in your garden, and that's good for you, but it's also good for the pollinating insects.
Yeah, we've actually I talk about chrysanthemums all the time because I don't know if it's like this for you or you are, but chrysanthemums, we think of them as these globy, almost bedding plants that start to be in the front of every supermarket around Halloween time. And people buy them, they put them in front of their doorstep, they pitch them after the holidays are over. But I mean, chrysanthemums can be these huge garden chrysanthemums that there's so many varieties of them, and they can, well, at least where I live, they're perennials. So they're coming back, and it's not just this grocery store globe that looks like trash after a couple of weeks.
Exactly. And do you know what they told me? These lovely nursery people who I went to see this week, they told me that those horrible kind of little dwarf ones that you get in the supermarkets are sprayed with chemical growth inhibitor. And that's what makes them so small. And so they're just full of chemicals and just not really they're just so artificial and horrible. Whereas, some of the taller chrysanthemums, the hardy ones, are fantastic, and they just look great.
I mean, some of them even have like a dahlia type quality to them too.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, I will put in the show notes, maybe I will email you and ask you the best places to find them where you are. But in the show notes of this podcast, I will list some good sources for chrysanthemums in the US that are the garden variety, because they're just so stunning.
Absolutely.
Okay. This might be a controversial one, but I would like for you to answer it.
Okay.
What does Claire Foster think about the Brits being way better at gardening than the United States?
Is that true?
I mean, come on.
How can I possibly comment?
All of the people that I look to, I mean, there are some great, great gardeners in the US, but you all have just been doing it right for a while. You also are always on the forefront of, you've banned peat already. Like, that is not going to happen here. I'm not sure ever. So
really, yeah.
I think that you all have just always been a little bit better at it, and always a little bit forward thinking on the trends and how to make these very sustainable, beautiful spaces.
I won't say better, but I think, we are so lucky in this country because we have such a massive long history of gardening. And, it just goes back years and years and years. And I think we have a tiny little island, but we've always had those pioneers who've gone out there and they've explored and they've brought plants back. And so I think there's always been that sense of experimentation with plants and an interest in plants that has just kind of rubbed off on all of us. And so when you have old, historic garden designers like Capability Brown and Repton and all those historic garden designers of the 18th and even before that, the 18th and 19th centuries especially, there's a lot of history to learn from, and I don't know, maybe it's just in our genetics that we love it. Yes. We connect with it.
Yeah, because I mean, you hear so much. I mean, even in Germany and places like that, there's allotment gardening. That's not something. Can you share what allotment gardening is? Because we don't have that culture here.
Well, yes, I can share that because that's how I started gardening, really. Because when I was at Gardens Illustrated, I got an allotment because I was living in London. I had a flat or a tiny little kind of courtyard, and I didn't have any space to grow things in. So my editor at the time, I think she could see that I was a bit interested, and she just nudged me and encouraged me to get an allotment, which was quite terrifying because they're huge spaces.
Share what an allotment is and how you can access them.
Okay, so an allotment is a communal patch of ground, usually in a built-up area, so in a city or a town, where you can apply for an allotment space. And traditionally, allotments were big long spaces of, I don't know, 9 meters by 4 meters. So big spaces, and they date back to before the war, before the Second World War, where people came together to grow their own food, and they are primarily, or were primarily, for growing vegetables. And they are in huge demand over here because so many people want to grow their own veg, and they're so interested in growing their own organic food. And so, yeah, they live on over here. And I think in other parts of Europe, there are allotments as well. So in Russia, they have, I think they're called dachas, which are very similar. But they are allowed to stay on their allotments, and they quite often have little summer houses where families go and stay for a few weeks at a time. But yeah, generally allotments are fabulous and they're great. And so you don't have anything similar in the US?
We have, where I live, there are a couple of places that the city has taken over where they've put in maybe 10 to 20 beds, like raised beds that people can apply for. But it's in very small quantities, and, it's a tiny little bed, which is, it's nice to have that, but it's really not the same. And I think, there's so much land here that's just lawned that there could be a lot more allotments, or just allotments in general that aren't these little fenced off 10 to 20 little garden beds that, it takes once someone has one of those beds, they don't give it up for a while,
Yes, exactly.
And they're few and far between here. If you don't live in a neighborhood that has that little thing, like, you're kind of out of luck.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think in this country there's a drive for more communal gardens as well. So, which aren't allotments, but where people can come together and just be. Sometimes they don't necessarily have to garden it, and that's happening more and more. And I think the RHS is really behind that and really driving for more garden space, and just so that everyone has access to that garden space. Because if you don't have access to green space, how can you understand or connect with nature, and how can you feel like you want to protect it and in any way help towards the climate crisis? And I think it's so important, absolutely crucial for children. And
that was one of my other questions for you. I mean, again, like, I think that a lot of how the RHS and a lot of just how Europe talks about gardening is for the earth, and it is for climate change, and it is for this bigger thing than just having some beautiful tulips. So when did that movement really start? And I mean, I don't really feel like we have that here as much. I mean, I definitely think in the US there's a lot about native. Like, native is like a huge trend right now, where, this is going to help ecological, but we don't really have that same movement with the connection between gardening and helping the planet and helping us.
I think it's very recent here, so perhaps it will come to you soon. I think it's really only in the last 5 to 10 years that people are really, really starting to think about it more. At Chelsea, the Chelsea Flower Show every year, I think in the last 5 years, there have been gardens that are very much demonstrating how you can plant and how you can help the environment through gardening. So it is a really recent thing, and it's perhaps not, like anything, it's not percolating to the entire population yet. There'd be lots and lots of people who don't have a clue. And sometimes I think that I tap into a fairly kind of refined garden audience that I think is, completely adjusting their eye to an aesthetic that is a bit more natural, a bit more relaxed, and a bit more garden, a bit more wildlife friendly. And that other people are still paving their front gardens over and not really having a clue. But you can only start in a small way, can't you? And hopefully, I'm always doing my best to spread the word about organic gardening and gardening for wildlife, because I think it's so important.
Yeah, I went to go see the speaker recently, and she spoke about, which I thought this was such a great way to think about it. Instead of telling people, okay, plant these things and things will come, she said, have someone identify what they would like to see in the garden. Like, what type of monarch would you like to see? What type of bee do you want to attract? And then research to see what those things like. Because she said, a lot of times we plant things because we think, oh, a pollinator might like this, but that pollinator might not like that actual flower. They're just sort of like really hungry and desperate for anything. So I think to sort of like reverse engineer that and think first about who you want to attract and then plant what they like. I'm really loving that approach.
I think that's such a good idea. Yeah, I think turning it around is so simple, isn't it? And also planting things that not only the pollinators like, but the caterpillars like, and that's not quite as kind of sexy, is it? Because you're planting things for them to eat and
right.
Make holes in. But that is so important too. And I think if you want to see those particular pollinators in your garden, as you say, just do some research and make connections that way, and find out what they exactly want and plant it. I mean, that's a brilliant idea.
I'm actually working with a client right now and helping her grow from seed and learn how to grow a flat cut flower garden. And she did her first installation for the cool season. We have very different seasons, by the way. I'm in like tropical kind of weather, but she did her first installation and she said, okay, what about pesticides, insecticides? I'm like, so my method is to take the guy and move him.
Yes,
like I'm not spraying anything. I'm not, and she's like, but they're already chewing holes. I'm like, well, okay, then they're going to poop it back out into your soil. But I think, one of the biggest things that I learned about insects when I went to school was just, most of it, 90% of it is cosmetic, right? It's like that thing is not actually harming your plant. It's feeding yourself. And unless it is a harmful thing and maybe you're selling plants, you have to think more about it. But I just let people chew and then I'll take them away. I can't squish them. I just can't do it.
Yeah. But what people need to understand is that if you allow nature to balance by not using pesticides, then you make this ecosystem that sorts itself out. You might have a few aphids on your beans, as I did this year, but there were also lots of ladybirds, and they came and ate the aphids. So that there's birds that eat some of the caterpillars, but if you start tampering with that fine balance and that ecosystem, then it just all goes to pot. If you start spraying insecticides, then the birds won't come. And it just, something very, very quick and simple, like spraying something with an insecticide, can just ruin the entire balance. But if you leave it, the damage won't be so bad because something will come along and sort that predator out.
Yeah.
All right, I know that sounds a bit idealistic, but it is true. I've seen it happen. I don't think I've ever really used chemicals in the garden, and I hopefully have a lot of wildlife there.
Mm-hmm. Okay, 2 more. What does Claire Foster think? I am a huge proponent of growing from seed. I force it to everyone that will listen to me talk about it, and sometimes they are like, this is boring. But give us your top 3 reasons of why to grow from seed.
Well, of course, number 1, and I'm talking to the right person with you, is it is so good for you and it's so good for the soul to be growing things from seed, because it is just so satisfying. And seeing that seed emerge once you've sown it, and it looks so tiny and so unpromising, and then it germinates, it's just so full of hope. And then you're nurturing that seedling and you're looking after it and you're watching it grow, and then it grows into this wonderful flower, and you think, I did that. And it's just incredibly good for you. And it's easy to do. So number 2 would be, because you can get so many more different varieties if you grow from seed. I think, especially with annuals, it's certainly in this country, in the garden centres, there's a fairly small choice of annuals to grow, to buy as plants or bedding plants or whatever. And some of them aren't that nice. Whereas if you grow from seed, you have an infinite array of beautiful things to grow. And it's just really exciting. I grow new things every year. I grow the same stalwarts every year. There's things that I really like, but I try also to grow things that are new to me. So it just makes it more exciting. And then number 3, it's because it's cheap. Going to the garden centre and buying lots of plants is so expensive now. I mean, if you're buying perennials, especially over here, they cost about £12. I mean, for a small plant, it's incredible. And it's actually quite easy to grow some of those perennials from seed. A lot of those perennials from seed. So that's another reason for that I grow, really, because it saves you money, particularly if you're wanting multiples of each plant. It's a much more cost-effective way to do it.
I know you're reflecting back on reason number 2. There's certain flowers I didn't think I liked because I only saw the version that my nursery or hardware store had. And then when I Googled it, I'm like, oh shit, this comes in so many different colors. This comes in so many different shapes. Like, I actually love this flower. So yeah, it's exactly. It's limiting, I think, to not grow from seed in so many ways.
No, absolutely. Yeah, I mean that Cosmos, for example, in the garden centres around here, you could just get the dwarf ones, and I like the tall willowy ones, and you can really only grow those from seed. So it's just so worthwhile. It really is.
Okay, well, Claire Foster said it. Everyone listen. Okay, so last question, and maybe this is going to be a future article, so you don't have to tell us, but what is your biggest prediction for 2026 for garden trends?
Prediction. Okay. Well, certainly over here, there is a big trend for growing in different mediums. So growing in sand is a big thing. Okay. So it sounds a bit weird, sounds a bit strange, but a lot of people are trying it, not necessarily turning their whole garden into a sandpit, but maybe having a patch of sand where they can grow different things in a different way. You can grow a huge diversity of different plants in sand because they don't grow so quickly. And they don't grow as strongly. So, it's not a good place for weeds like nettles and docks to grow. So you don't get the competition from those weeds. And weirdly, it also, whilst it is very free draining, which is good for a lot of plants, it's also holds the moisture in. So if you think about it, sand on a beach, under that top layer, it can be quite kind of damp, can't it? So as well as it not holding really a lot of wet, it holds a little bit of moisture, and so in drought conditions, it's really good as well. So there's a lot of that going on, and also not only growing in sand, but growing in rubble and crushed concrete and all these different things. There's a lot of experimentation going on over here. So that, to me, is the big kind of exciting thing happening in 2026.
Oh my gosh, I can just picture this beautiful garden with like a little sandscape on the side it just sounds so stunning. And if someone were interested in trying that, we're not just talking about like sand that you would go get to fill a kid's sandbox. Share is there a specific type of sand that you would need to grow in?
Well, I think over here it's called builder's sand. So it's quite a kind of coarse sand.
Right.
So yeah. And I think if people want to see gardens in this country that are doing it, have a look at it's called Knepp Castle, KNEPP, and a garden designer called Tom Stewart Smith, who's very well known over here, has designed this amazingly experimental kind of undulating sand and rubble garden there. And the plant diversity, if you look at the website, is incredible, absolutely incredible.
So I had one friend question that is a flower farmer, and she's a fan of yours. And one of her questions was, what flower does she wish that she could grow but will just not grow in your zone or climate?
Gosh, I'll have to think about that. There definitely will be something. Okay. I think I mean, we grow quite a lot of the salvias here, the kind of South American salvias, which I love. And there is one of those that I just can't keep going from year to year, and it's called Phyllis Fancy. And it's just a really, really lovely salvia, and it's just a little bit too tender for me in this, probably in the wet that we have over here. So I wish I could grow that.
I cannot grow peonies where I live.
Oh, no, that's sad. That is sad.
It really is sad.
Oh, no.
Oh, it's too hot and humid.
It's just too humid. Okay, yes.
I would just love to grow a peony, but
I saw peonies growing wild in Cyprus, actually, and but that is very hot, but it's a dry heat, I guess.
Yes, it is so humid, and there's no peonies here. I'm in, our zones are a little bit different, but I'm in zone 9A, and if you go to 8, you can grow them in 8, but you can't grow them in 9. So thank you for all of that outside information. At the end of the podcast, we move into the inside, and you had shared that it might be hard to think of an inside because you're always outside, but you did share a show that you're into. So what is this show?
It's called Slow Horses, and I don't really watch much TV in the summer because I literally am outside the whole time. I go outside into my garden in the evening, but as the nights draw in, I like watching a good series. And Slow Horses is a British series, and it's a kind of spy thriller, but with a slight tongue in cheek. And so it's got a little bit of humor, but it's quite kind of on the edge, and it's quite exciting, but it's quite funny as well. And the main character, called Jackson Lamb, is played by Gary Oldham, and he is just the most unpleasant but brilliant character. And he just plays it so brilliantly. He's got greasy hair, and he's just always sitting on the desk with his feet up on the desk, and he's got holes in his socks, and he's always passing wind, I'll say politely. And he is just absolutely brilliant. So it's a hugely entertaining series. And have you watched any of it yet?
So it's a very popular show here as well. It won some Emmys in the US, even though it's a British series. And it's interesting because I've been wanting to watch it, but it streams on Apple here. It's one of the streamers that I don't have, or I don't have a login from a friend. So when you put that as your watch, I'm like, okay, this is a sign. I just need to because I really did like Gary Oldham, and less of his greasy days. He used to be pretty hot, but
yeah, I know. And he's been in some really good things. So but he manages to make himself look so unwholesome in this.
But no, I'm so excited to start watching it. And just in general, I think, let's just be clear, I'm very clearly an Anglophile. So I do love lots of British television. I don't know how many episodes Slow Horses has, but I think something that I love about British television is it's never 25 episodes. It's sometimes, 4 to 8. They're not these incredibly long seasons, which makes it much easier to binge if you haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think we're on season 4 now, but each one only has, 8 maybe. So yeah, so it's not endless. I agree.
Yeah.
And they're feeding it to us quite slowly at the moment. So you can only have one a week. So you look forward to it then.
This is the last question, and cannot wait to hear.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen an episode of Love Island?
I think I might have done once while I was doing the ironing. And my sons were watching it when they were but it was quite a long time ago.
Okay, because I was just curious.
Do you watch it?
Yeah, I watched a lot of horrible television, but during the pandemic, they started showing the British because now there's a US version as well. But during the pandemic, I found it, and there wasn't a million seasons of it yet, but man, it was so soothing just to hear the British voices talking about stupid stuff around a pool. And my sisters and I, we all live in different states, but we watched it basically together during the pandemic.
No, and that gives you something to talk about, and it's
it was fun. Yeah, it was great fun. And I definitely there's a lot of British shows. There was this one called Mistresses. I don't know if you ever, it was like kind of like a drama rom-com-y thing. And now we have BritBox here, so we can watch a lot more British shows that we didn't have access to before.
Oh, well, that's good. I don't think I've watched Mistresses either, but I'm not the best person to ask for TV.
Yeah, that's why I wanted to see if you had ever actually seen an episode of Love Island or not.
One.
They have a lot of turf there. You would not like the landscaping because it's a lot of turf.
Yeah, that's true.
Thank you so much for doing this. Everything you do is so stunning. I love the way you write about gardening. It's always so encouraging, and it feels like you don't create a huge barrier for people, which I really appreciate a lot.
Thank you. That's such a nice compliment. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Of course. Thank you. That's the show. Thanks for listening. If you like this episode or any of the episodes, leave a review. You don't even have to write anything. Just leave a 5-star review on Spotify. Here's how you do it. Find that little gear icon next to the show. Hit it. There's a little drop down. Rate this show 5 stars. Go back to your day. And if you want to know more about Basker or working with me to do horticultural therapy, head to baskergardens.com. Lots of it. Lots and lots about it in the show notes. I'll talk to you next week.